Greetings and welcome to the Dr. J Vlog series. It's Saturday, August 9th, 2025, and on Saturdays we talk about sports and sprinkle in a bit of humor. So the theme this week for the Dr. J Vlog series has been cruelty. So I'm actually not going to be talking about sports as such, but rather I'm going to offer a few observations with respect to the cruelty of the aging process. Now again, Eddington's arrow of time only flows in one direction. So we all have to be prepared in that sense. And cruelty might be too strong a word, but it's at least a little bit annoying. To forever be losing battle after battle to entropy, the entropy associated with the aging process. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, in a nutshell, we're all falling apart. And it takes more and more energy to keep things together. And somewhat ironically, precisely as we get older, when we have less and less energy at our disposal. So for example, I'm just working on this little bit for the vlog, right? I figure I'll just do about 5 minutes of shtick. No big deal, right? Well, I fell asleep within about 2 minutes of sitting down, right? And so that's the first example of the cruelty of aging. When you're my age and you make the mistake of sitting down in the evening, there's always a high risk that you'll end up falling asleep. And that's exactly what happened. And then there's the real life example of teaching at the university, which is what I spent my career doing. I think for the better part of the last 40 years. And now you'd expect, of course, the students to occasionally fall asleep. They've been out late partying. Maybe you're just that boring, especially if I'm doing a lecture on history and I'm not being particularly entertaining, right? So you expect them to fall asleep. But what's really embarrassing is when I fall asleep myself. When my lectures are so boring, I put myself to sleep. And that's quite embarrassing. And so then I'll suddenly snap awake, right? I'll say something like, "Hey, did I miss something?" And I wish I could attribute that to narcolepsy. About narcolepsy. But I went to a sleep clinic and I was tested, and they confirmed I do not have narcolepsy. Okay, and for that matter, I don't have cataplexy, and I don't have epilepsy, or a problem with drinking too many Pepsis. For that matter. So that's just another key indicator then that you're getting older. That is to say, there are things that happen to you that are just, chronic in nature, and they just happen for no reason at all. Okay? And, again, when you get tested and, you go into the doc and say, what's wrong with me? And they'll come up with some kind of a condition. You say, well, what do I do about that? What can I do? What's the treatment and so forth? And they'll say something like, well, if you were younger, we could do X, Y, or Z. I said, well, okay, that doesn't help. What about if you're my age? The doc would say something like, well, it's probably better just to learn to live with that at this point, right? I mean, at this late stage in life, why bother? Why worry? Just put that in the same category, basically, as the other losses, for example, that you're experiencing. So losses? Like what losses? What are you talking about? I ask. Well, and so the doc responded, well, according to your chart, you have the following, right? You have hair loss. You have hearing loss, loss of bladder control, memory loss, loss of sexual libido, job loss, and significant cognitive decline as well. So wait, what? I lost my job? And apparently you did, she said. So, well, how come I didn't know about that? She said, well, probably because of the latter condition that I mentioned. And what was that? I asked. She said, exactly. It's so frustrating when people don't explain your problems to you. Anyway, okay, so how else do I know that I'm getting older? Well, when I first started teaching full time, way back in the day, in James Madison University in the States, in the late 1980s, I remember, teaching a course, and at the end of the course, we, give out the final exam, and then this. I was just a few years older than the students, right? So this cute young co-ed, she actually slipped in her phone number with her final exam, right? And she said, give me a call, according, from her note and so forth. So I thought, oh, that's kind of flattering, right? And then, when I started teaching at King's almost a quarter century ago, I was amazed when a student did the same thing. She included a phone number with her final exam, right? And she told me to call the number as well. But as it turns out, it wasn't for her, it was for her mother. So I said, oh, okay, well, that's generational. I guess that kind of makes sense. And then it happened again last fall, right after another 20 plus years of teaching. Only this time, the student told me the number that she wanted me to call was for her grandmother. So anyway, I guess, again, the arrow of time. What are you going to do? But I said, your grandmother? Seriously? I mean, how old do you think I am anyway? She said, well, I'm not exactly sure, but I just figure, based on the stories you tell and things you talk about, you and her are probably the same age or the same generation, whatever. I said, oh, okay. Well, like, for example, what? She goes, well, you talk about the war a lot, and she talked about the war all the time and all the sacrifices that she and her family had to make. Well, I said, well, which war were we talking about? She said, World War II. I asked her, well, how old do you think I am? I was born in 62, That's about the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis. And by the way, that's 17 years after the end of the Second World War, okay? In fact, I remember well the sleepless nights in October of that year, of 62. She asked, how come? Were you concerned then about the Soviets and the Cuban missiles? And I explained, no, I actually didn't know anything about geopolitics. At 6 months of age, the problem was I was a colicky baby. So, of course, I was up all night. Cuban Missile Crisis, I learned about that years later. Anyway, but life's come full circle. So I'm no longer colicky, but I am still up all night, or most of the night. And you know what? You actually know the reason why, if you've been paying attention. That is because I fall asleep for 10 minutes randomly every time I sit down throughout the day. So I got to stop taking all these involuntary power naps, and then I'm convinced I will, eventually sleep better at night. And then finally, another thing that I've noticed about getting older is that I take a lot more pride and joy in the little things that I accomplish on a daily basis. So for example, I'm excited to wake up each day. That's the first thing, right? And it's not because, I have so much to do. It's because I'm just happy to be above the ground. So that's my first kind of victory, okay? Unless, of course, this is all a dream or the universe's, cruel joke that they're playing upon me and all of this isn't real. Is this real? Is this thing on? I don't know. I'm just hoping this isn't a dream. Anyway, and then I'll go out for a run and I'll feel like it's a great success. Why? Not because I went for the run, but because I managed not to trip for the entire run, right? Or stumble out into the middle of traffic. And best of all, I was able to find my way home again. Again, this is another little victory. Today, for example, I was so proud on a completely different note, simply because I was able to trim all of my toenails successfully and without injuring myself. That's something. Anyway, again, little victories that you run across day to day. And speaking of which, I'm proud to report I recently earned a bronze medal in a sporting competition, 3rd place, in our little family basketball competition last Father's Day, right in June. So we played a couple of games of 21, and I was remarkably consistent, earning 3rd place in both games. Not bad at age 63, if I do say so myself. Now, sure, it was just my two of my sons and myself playing and competing, but I still felt like I did really well to earn the bronze both games, okay? All right, enough of my bragging. And as ever, may you and yours continue to create peace in your lives, nurture love in your hearts, and dole out hugs in abundance. And remember, 3rd place ain't too bad. See you soon.